Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good night. Pretty good week. Nothing too eventful to report, but kind of just status quo around here. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thanks. Had a bit of an oopsie at work. Forgot to save something I was working on, and my computer decided to do a reboot. Ended up losing it all, and very on short notice had to try and redo it between 2:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. So that was a little bit of a whoopsie for me, but hopefully it'll teach me to avoid that situation in the future. But other than that, I'm doing well. Looking forward to the weekend.
Good. Well, let's talk a little soccer, I guess. If you are a new listener to our podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
So we talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, post-secondary, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players, city's soccer community, and amateur leagues, up to the post-secondary and professional levels.
Talking a fair bit about the Canadian Championship. We're going to talk about Blizzard. They played a match against CF Montreal this week, and we'll talk about how that match ended up. And Calgary is playing on Saturday. They're playing on Vancouver Island, and it's a match. Usually these are midweek, but for whatever reasons, this one's on a Saturday. And we'll do a little for the Alberta Premier League and interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, earlier today, you managed to have a conversation with Adam Pearlman, a new signing for Calgary FC on loan from Toronto FC. Pearlman backs Wanderers last year in the CPL, also on loan. He's his footing with Cavalry in most games, if not every game, I believe, at right back. So you talked to him a little bit about how his early...
Yeah, and we'll get to that interview on our cap. I think it doesn't happen every day. So your suggestion, I think, was a good one. Let's lead off with the Calgary Blizzard.
My name is Mo Gander, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So probably one of the biggest David versus Goliath stories that we've talked about on this podcast is the matchup in the opening round of the Canadian Championship between Calgary Blizzard, the Alberta Premier League champions from 2025, and MLS club CF Montreal. We knew, Jason, that it was going to be a very slim chance of Blizzard getting a result in this one. And there was no Hollywood miracle in store. They did lose 5-0, but that wasn't unexpected. And I think the players, despite that drubbing, can still hold their heads high and know that they did their best against a team that has a salary cap, in the millions of dollars.
Oh, for sure. I think, when you look at it, like 5-0, obviously not a super complimentary score, but I don't think it's embarrassing. I think, if it was 9-0, that would have been classified as being a bit embarrassing. But, 5-0, they played them pretty well and pretty tough for most of the first half and would have been hard to keep it up forever. But most of that first half played pretty well.
Yeah, I watched the vast majority of this game, and definitely the first 40 minutes, it was quite obvious that the two teams were lopsided. Montreal had almost all of the ball. They hit the post, they hit the crossbar. Blizzard didn't manage to do much once they did get the ball over the halfway line. But no, they stayed really compact. They were defensively disciplined. And their goalkeeper, I forget his first name, but his last name is Shafi.
Is it Haney Shafi, I think?
Annie Shafi? Yeah, I know he had a couple of saves, including the save of the game in that first half. So, yeah, really great start to the game. But like you said, these games, it's always hard to maintain that discipline into the second half. And after going down 2-0 in the first half, the writing was kind of on the wall. And second half was a little bit painful. But no, I mean, keeping it, in that 5-goal range is, they can say they did well.
For sure. Yeah, I know you watched most of it. I caught parts, but you had some opinions about Blizzard players, or at least one player that really stood out in your mind.
Oh, yeah. The Blizzard player who I thought had the most impressive performance was Will Omarenyi. He was playing left back, and yeah, he did well in possession. He had a couple of good tackles. He tracked back. He jockeyed the guy he was defending well. So, he stood out in my opinion from the Blizzard perspective.
Yeah, well, he was a former Cavalry draft pick, and I think he did spend part of one winter playing in New Zealand on a amateur deal of some sort. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a player who, after his Dinos career, does try to make some additional steps in the soccer world. So I guess we'll see what happens.
And I did just want to highlight to show like who Blizzard were really up against. Like obviously, you know, Montreal's not having the greatest season at the moment in MLS, but I Googled the 5 players who scored for them because each of their goals came from different players. And Ivan Jaime, who scored a really great direct free kick, he was most recently with Valencia in La Liga, played 9 games for them. Daniel Rios, who also scored, you know, he came up through the Chivas Guadalajara system, played a decent number of games with them, as well as other teams in MLS. Wiki Carmona has 2 caps for Venezuela. Ivan Losenko, Ukrainian, came through Shakhtar Donetsk Academy. That's the biggest club in Ukraine. And yeah, so I mean, that just shows the caliber of players that a team that is essentially the University of Calgary Dinos had to take on.
Yeah, that's those are some impressive names. So the Blizzard's Canadian Championship run is over. They're back in action, I believe, this weekend on Saturday, and back to regular Alberta Premier League action. So overall, I think this is still a big accomplishment and a big deal. It's the first time an amateur Calgary club has competed in this tournament, and I'm sure hopeful it's not the last. I think, you know, with the Alberta Premier League, most of the teams being in Calgary, I think the odds are good that we could see another Calgary team next year, I hope.
I agree completely.
Hey, it's Adam Pearlman. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So as you mentioned, Cavalry is also kicking off their Canadian Championship journey this week. On Saturday, they'll be taking on Pacific FC on Vancouver Island in Langford, a team that they've played in the opening round of the Canadian Championship, I think more than any other team, Jason. I feel like at least 3 years we've seen this matchup in the opening round.
Did they play them last year? Was that Vancouver FC they played? I think they played Vancouver FC last year. But yeah, they've played them, and for whatever reasons, the club they've had a couple times where they've had runs, but they've also had probably more early exits than good runs in this tournament.
Yeah, than we'd expect for a team like Cavalry. I remember a few years ago, I want to say 2023, Pacific knocked them out of the opening round of the Can Champ in a penalty shootout way back in the inaugural 2019 season. Cavalry beat Pacific over 2 legs in the opening round of the Can Champ that year. It was a 2-legged affair. But yeah, I think coming into this one, you have to assume Cavalry is the heavy favorite, as Pacific has been having a pretty woeful season, similar to 2025. They're
in 8th place right now with 1 point in 5 matches. So, and the Cavs beat them. It was the first match of the year, I believe, at Starlight Stadium. You would think, even though the Cavs are on the road, that this is a game they would be favored in. Yeah, I'd say the expectation would be that they're expecting to win this match and move on to the next round. Which is a pretty big incentive on its own, because that would be against Vancouver Whitecaps in a 2-legged series in early July. So an opportunity to take on the likes of Thomas Miller and Ryan Gauld. And maybe, do you think Sam Adekubi could be fit by then? Maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, the opportunity to take on, you know, a team that was runner-up in MLS last year. I mean, it's a great opportunity. We've seen Cavalry beat Whitecaps before in this competition. So yeah, I'm really hoping for a good result against Pacific so that they can book their spot in the quarterfinals. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, Scott, but how would you feel about going to a match at Spruce Meadows with Thomas Mueller playing? I have honestly thought of it before, Jason. The opportunity to ask him a question in a press conference after the game would that'd probably be on my bucket list. Thomas Mueller, I think, as longtime listeners probably know already, I'm a big fan of German football and the Bundesliga, and I watched Thomas Miller play for Bayern Munich for probably a good 12 years every weekend. So yeah, it would be pretty surreal to watch him trot out onto Atco Field. We don't know too much about the Cavs injury situation. We've been kind of assured that Amir Didic is not too far away from playing, so I don't know how likely it is he'd be in this match. And Nate Edwards on the One Soccer broadcast last week, they said he was in concussion protocol. And then, well, Harry Payton, he left that super match with an injury, so we don't have a good feel for how he's doing right now. And unfortunately, I don't think either of us are going to be able to get to see the press conference, which is tomorrow, Friday. So won't have a chance to ask that question. But, I'd like to still think that even with being a few players down, I still think Calgary's in a pretty good position overall.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Well, I think now would be a good time for us to run our interview with Adam Pearlman. I know that Calgary has had a long history of bringing players in from Canadian MLS teams on loan and it working out quite well.
Yeah, the two examples I think come to mind are Karifa Yao and Jay Herdman, who's of course still with the club. And I actually Googled Karifa Yao recently because I was wondering what he was up to. And he seems to be playing regularly for Rhode Island FC in the USL Championship.
All right, well, I guess now would be a good time. Let's run that interview with Adam Pearlman now. I'd like to welcome Adam Pearlman to the podcast. Adam is a defender with Calgary FC and on loan from Toronto FC. Adam, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So I guess probably a good place to start is, can you just give us a little bit of background about your career? I know, how you came up through the system and just walk us through it.
Yeah, for sure. I immigrated actually to Canada from South Africa when I was about 7-8 years old. And I just joined like a local team in Toronto. With a few of like my buddies, really enjoyed it. And I got scouted to like the TFC Academy. So I went straight to the TFC Academy, made my way through the academy, played years up, played years my same age, GA Cups, all like the fancy tournaments that all these MLS academies have. Finally, I found my way into the second team, had a really good breakout season, and I was able to sign a homegrown contract with the first team. And yeah, this is my third year on contract with the first team. Last year, I actually went on loan to Halifax in the CPO. Had a great year, great experience. And then this year, we thought it was best to have one more loan spell. And Calgary was the best spot for me to come.
Yeah, so actually I want to ask you about that, about how you ended up coming to Calgary. Like, I know you probably can't give us all the details of how it all works out behind the scenes, but like, what's the process like when the opportunity for a loan comes up? It's something that you get approached, I'm assuming you talk to Tommy, that sort of thing. Like, how does it all work? Can you just give us a bit of an impression of that?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a three-way decision. Obviously, TFC has a say, the club that's possibly joining has a say, and then obviously me and my family have a say. How this specifically came about, I'm not sure if TFC reached out to like Tommy or Tommy reached out to TFC. I'm not really sure how it works, but we got in contact. I had a few different calls with a bunch of different teams, and I just felt that the best fit for me at this moment in my career was to come here. There were some other great options, but yeah, like I said, in this point of my career, the way Tommy and Tofa and the staff and the team proposed what they were going to give me, it really suited me as a player and the pathway that I want to continue like going on in my journey.
Typically, as I understand it, you've mostly played center back, and then this year, you've been playing right back pretty much exclusively, I think. So how did that play into the whole thing? Like, was the idea of playing right back, was that part of the appeal, or how did that all work? Because I'm assuming it wasn't like you agreed to the loan and you got here and Tommy said, "Surprise, you're playing right back."
Yeah, no, they spelled it out for me for sure. Actually, last year for Halifax is when I started really playing right back. Like midway through the season, I kind of transitioned into like a right wing back role for them, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I did a pretty good job there. And then going back to TFC for kind of the beginning of the season and preseason, they also really liked my role in that right wing back role and my diversity that I can play there and I can play center back. So throughout preseason, I was kind of flipping through both, like right back, center back, right wing back, all that. But yeah, Tommy, he let me know that if I came here, like that right back role would, be up for grabs, and it's a great opportunity for me.
So what are the differences really like in regards to like the skill sets, like of being a center back and a right back? Like how do you feel that the role is different, not just tactically, but like, for yourself? Like,
Yeah, I mean, as a right back, obviously you're able to get up the field much more. And I feel like that suits me because one of my qualities is my athleticism. I'm very powerful, and I enjoy getting up the field. So being able to do that and add that to my game and help the team with my strengths, I think it really suits me. Yeah.
as we've already talked about your time with TFC, and you've definitely lived in the MLS world, and you've lived in the CPL world last year with Halifax and this year with Calgary. Can you just sort of give us thoughts about comparing sort of the level and the quality? Like I know that obviously MLS, there's sort of a different level there, but like just the differences between the leagues and that you've perceived.
Yeah, I think obviously MLS is becoming one of the top leagues in the world, in my opinion, with all like these big name players coming over. But CPL has some really, really good quality players. And I think there is a difference, of course, due to many reasons, financially, this, that, but I think the league here in Canada is very good and the quality is very good. And you can see that in games, and can champs just happened, and there are upsets, and you can see qualities in certain people. But yeah, I mean, both leagues are growing.
Anyway, we're early in the season, but how would you say it's going for you? How do you rate your performances thus far?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with my performances. There's still, of course, areas to improve, still building relationships with players around me and in my kind of zone. Obviously Ali Musi, a big player in the league. And for us, of course, I've only really played one full game with him. So there's still a lot to build, a lot of connections to build, learning how each other play. But, defensively, we've been very good. We're undefeated. So, and individually, I think, there's still another gear that I know I can get to, but as you said, like it's still early, still learning the system and everything. So I've been happy so far.
You're on a team right now that has like quite a few tall players. Like I know last year when you played, for Halifax, you were kind of one of the key go-to people when it came to like a set piece because you're one of the taller guys out there for the team. But now you've got, Didic and Klomp and Kobsa and Toby too, although he's usually delivering on set pieces right now. But is that different? Like not being like the only guy, like there being three or four of you potentially, does that change things for you? And
Yeah,
like,
it's a little different, sometimes you're a target, sometimes you're picking, sometimes you're, just distracting. But at the end of the day, it's whatever the team needs. Like when the team wins, everybody on the team gets recognized because a winning team, people always look at winning teams and the players on winning teams. So for me, we can switch it up. We can do whatever as a team, and we do. But if I have to, set a pick so Didic or Klomp can score, that's what I'll do. No problem. Yeah.
any specific goals for this season? Like any targets that you're specifically going for right now?
Yeah. I have a few individual and team targets. I'm a little superstitious, so my individual ones I'll keep to myself for now. But yeah, we have team targets. Obviously, we want to be the best team in the league. We want to win trophies. We want to do all these things. So there are definitely targets that we want to hit throughout the season.
I know focusing on this year, obviously, but like, what are your goals and aspirations for your soccer career, beyond going forward into, 2027 and beyond?
Yeah, I have, short-term goals, long-term goals, but I want to be the best player that I can be, whether that be playing in the MLS with TFC, whether that being getting into Europe, which is a dream of mine, and playing in Europe. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to do everything I can every day for the team, for the team I'm on now, Calgary, obviously, and for myself to push me and the guys next to me to try get to that next level.
Pretty much it. Although I have one more question I want to ask because we always like to ask the defenders this question. So, who's the toughest player you've had to defend against, like at whatever level you want? Just is there any name or names in particular that sort of jump out at you when I ask you that question?
Yeah, I think I think Gote is one from last year.
Yeah.
Playing against Gote, he's one hard player to play against. So if I had to choose, and then just a guy from outside the league, Esmir, plays on, what is it, Bologna? No, plays on, why am I blanking? They just qualified for the World Cup. They're playing against Canada, first round.
Bosnia.
Playing for Bosnia now, starting, playing for PSV. I played against him when he was at New England, and also great player, honestly.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you want to add at this point? Anything else you want to say to the fans or anything before we wrap it up?
No, just I'm excited to be here, and it's a long season, so we need all their hope to, carry us through the season, and we're going to give it all, and I'm going to give it all for them and for the guys around me.
All right. Well, thanks to Adam Pearlman. Scott, we both had to do our research on that to figure out who the player was he was talking about, but we did figure it out. So if anyone's wondering, it is
Esmir Bayraktarovic, who's 21 years old and currently playing for PSV Eindhoven in the Dutch Eredivisie.
Yeah, thank you for pronouncing that for me.
Problem. I probably butchered it, but
well, better than me, I'm sure.
Hey everyone, this is Francesco Bartuillo, and you are listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Scott, let's talk about the Alberta Premier League. We've got a pretty full slate of matches this week after having only have a few games last Friday. This week we've got a bunch more. A bunch of games here in Calgary on Friday and also game on Saturday as well up in Edmonton.
Yeah, tons of options if you want to get out for some Alberta Premier League action today, the day being when this episode is released. Wild U23 will be facing Foothills 3:30 p.m. at the Calgary Soccer Centre. On the other side of the city, Cavalry's reserves will be taking on Foothills and former Cavalry player Fraser Aird with kickoff at 6 p.m. at SAIT. And then at 5 p.m., Villains Women will be playing BTB at the Villains Dome. And right after that, Villains Men will be playing BTB at the same facility. Will that be the first game that Villains Dome is hosted in the Alberta Premier League?
I think so. I would have to. I know last year they talked about it, but I don't know if they actually played. If everything was ready for them to play last year, so most likely it is their first match.
Well, I've actually never been out there yet, Jason. So at some point, I should probably try and do it. Get to a game.
I've seen it from the outside, but that's as far as it's gone thus far. And Calgary Rangers will be playing Callies United at Weber Athletic Park. The men will face off at 5 p.m. on Friday, and the women will play at 7:10.
And then on Saturday, Blizzard, fresh off their trip to Montreal, on the men's side, will be playing St. Albert Impact. I guess that would be, I believe, a rematch of last year's final. Kickoff for that one is 5:15. And before that, St. Albert women will be hosting Blizzard women at 3 p.m., presumably the same field.
So, Scott, is there any of these matches that particularly catch your attention? Like, I think, I could make an argument they're all interesting in their own way, but is there anyone that like I said, sort of makes you like? There's players on the teams that make you a little bit extra interested in it?
Well, I think Cavalry versus Foothills at SAIT, only because of the Fraser Aird factor. I'd be curious to see how Fraser Aird looks in the APL, and it'll be interesting to see him taking on his former team's reserve team.
Yeah, I would agree that Foothills is a very intriguing team from that point of view. Shanann Chanda is also playing for them. Cavalry draft pick from this year, Emmanuel Danakinde, is playing for them again. There's Miguel De Rocha, had a pretty legendary career at Mount Royal. Lots of familiar and interesting names there for the Foothills men's team.
Yeah, definitely. And then, as mentioned, I think, am I wrong? Was the final on the men's side Blizzard versus St. Albert? I feel like it was, and that's why I think that game would be obviously.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
and maybe not feasible to go to that game unless you feel like driving out to St. Albert on a Saturday. But just from the perspective of it being the rematch of last year's championship game, as well as the fact that Blizzard will have literally probably, just a day or two before gotten off the plane after this big match in Montreal against MLS opposition.
Mm-hmm. And Scott, we didn't forget about the Calgary Wild this week, but they have a bye this week and they will not be back in action until they play Montreal again next week. So we'll get back and talk about them more next week in our episode.
Sounds good. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this episode downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other ways to listen, including our YouTube channel. There are also links to buy my book, Here Come the Cavalry, which is all about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or a comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media through sites such as X, Instagram, or Blue Sky. Our username is @YYCSoccer403. Thanks for listening.